Hello, everybody. Get off my lawn cards. I'm Dan, and part three of my look at the current card companies looks at King Kong, and that is Fanatics slash Tops. They are at the top of the industry right now, and what I would like to look at is a process that has gotten a little bit of traction in mainstream talk, and it's a term called Enshittification. And I want to go through what that term means and how it applies to Fanatics' short history. I think Fanatics has been in the game about 2, 3 years already. And there are a lot of signs that Fanatics is practicing enshittification. Okay. So, what is enshittification? It basically is the degradation of services where you're charging more, a company charges more and delivers less and less. There's lots of examples of this. Streaming services. Remember when Netflix first came out, it was cheap. They didn't have ads. Now you have to pay more, and you have to pay more for a service that doesn't have ads versus paying for ads. Streamers, like I said, appliances. A couple weeks ago, I had to get my air conditioner fixed, and it's quite old. It's almost 20 years old. It's about had it. And the guy that fixed it, who's a really good guy, he's like, hey, he goes, it was a fairly cheap fix. He's like, if I were you, I would just run this air conditioner into the ground because the new ones aren't as good. And, that's an example. Search engines don't deliver like they used to. You see ads everywhere. I was watching Jeremy Lee's show last night, and there were ads that were popping up like over half the screen. That was weird, and you couldn't hear the Jeremy Lee live cast. It just lots of examples of this throughout society, and there's a lot of complaints about it. And Fanatics is one of those that I think is maybe not directly using the playbook, but there's plenty of examples of how enshittification is hitting with Fanatics. Let me run down. There's 3 steps to this process. Okay. Number 1, you have to attract users. You have to get people on board. And Fanatics did that right off the bat. They decided to get into the hobby. They bought out Tops. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing it. I think 500 million is the number that's mentioned. They right away came out and said, hey, we're going to 10x the hobby. So they're getting users like, collectors and businesses immediately on board. Buying up licenses, they bought up the basketball license, they bought up the football license, they already had the baseball license. WWE also, which is growing in popularity. They created networks, social media networks, and got themselves tied to certain influencers, YouTube influencers, and other social media forums. They use their connections through Fanatics with famous athletes. There's a lot of famous athletes now in the collecting space, whereas there wasn't a couple of years ago. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's going to lead to some issues as we look at that. So the step 1, attract users. Tops has done a very good job of promoting the brand. And the brand, I thought, when Panini was a top dog, I thought that Tops had gotten stale. And Panini gave the hobby kind of a shot in the arm, at least for a while. Second, once you attract users, you get people on board, then you attract business customers. You get people to sell the product. And Fanatics has done a good job of that. Breakers especially. Breakers are kind of, I won't say new on the scene. They've been around a while, but not to the extent that they are now. Fanatics and Breakers work hand in hand. Fanatics also has done a very good job of trying to strong arm hobby shop owners. Okay, hey, there's a checklist. If you own a hobby store, these are the things that we want you to do. They were recently on Sports Card Nonsense podcast, and they were saying, hey, you know, we want hobby shops looking a certain way if we're going to do business with them. And it's almost like, hey, you're going to do it our way or else. And that's kind of the way it is. It's really strong arm tactics. That's why you'll never see any hobby shop owners slash influencers that are getting stuff from Fanatics ever complain about Fanatics. They just won't. And it's, hey, what's it going to hurt to call out Fanatics on things? Fanatics claims they want people to do that, but really they don't. They really don't. They're just doing a lot of talk is cheap in my opinion. They have ad partnerships. There's a lot of mainstream ads for Fanatics slash Tops. Uh, Social media, tons of social media. I'll get to that in a minute. Hanging out with famous athletes. Michael Rubin loves rubbing shoulders with athletes. He loves he really, really likes it. Retail deals, Walmart, Target, Dick's Sporting Goods, Lids, they're working with all those. And so that's step number 2. First, attract users, kind of create a big splash. Second, attract business customers, someone that distributes a product, hobby shops, influencers, retail stores. And then the third step in this enshittification process is exploit everyone. And we're in this phase right now. It only took Fanatics a couple years to get to this space where they're doing this. There's lots of examples of how they're exploiting everyone. Breakers, for instance, get tons of product. The backyard breaks guys. Karl Anthony Towns recently opened 100 cases of Topps Update basketball, Topps Chrome Update basketball. Nobody knows how he got 100 cases, but he had 100 cases. He's in the hobby. Hey, I'm collecting cards, and I'm looking at all these cards I'm collecting. Oh, he does 100 break with 100 cases. How did he get those? Meanwhile, hobby shops are complaining, hey, we're not getting any of this stuff. Meanwhile, Backyard Breaks gets pallets of stuff. And meanwhile, individuals, if you want a box, let's say you want a hobby box of Topps Chrome Update basketball, which is exceptionally expensive for what you're going to probably get. You have to go through the EQL process, which is basically an online lottery. And if you don't get any, you're SOL. Your if no EQL equals SOL. And that's what a lot of people go through. Hey, I'm signing up for the EQL. Well, you might get one box. Meanwhile, Karl Anthony Towns got 100 cases. It's out of whack. It is totally out of whack. There's a huge MSRP for wax. The hits are few and far between, which Topps does not really want you to know based on their social media. If you're on Instagram, for instance, and Topps has all different kinds of Instagram posts, baseball, basketball, football, all of them are 101s, the big autograph. It's like every hit that they do on social media is a 101. It's some dual patch autograph. It's the rookie card patch now that they're putting. Every single post is huge hits, which for a lot of people it's like, hey, I could get these hits. I could get this life-changing hit. And so you have people that are tapping into that. The fear of missing out, hey, I can do this. It's like lottery tickets. This lottery ticket's going to change my life. This box of Topps Chrome Update basketball is going to change my life. From the get-go, Fanatics practices, shrinkflation, less autographs in hobby boxes, less cards per pack, shrinkflation. We've seen that in other things, cereal, potato chips. We've seen it all throughout society. Fanatics is really good at tapping into that. Going back to the the big hits. A lot of people don't remember this, but in 2023, when Fanatics first kind of rolled out, Michael Rubin, the head of Fanatics, had a box rip with a famous soccer athlete. I can't remember his name. And because I'm not a soccer fan, they ripped a 2023 Top Sterling box. There's 2 packs in a box. It's one of those high end products. And the soccer star got a cut autograph of Jackie Robinson. One, I think it was a 101. I'm pretty sure it was. Michael Rubin opened the other pack that was in the box, and he had a Mike Trout 101. And it was filmed. And it's like, wow, what are the chances of having a rip on social media where the owner of the company and a huge soccer star each pull the biggest hits probably at that time out of that box, out of one box? Makes you wonder, you know. And that's not the only time that's happened, by the way. More about that in a minute. Fanatics basically has a monopoly on the card industry. I mean, you've got Panini and you've got, you've got Leaf, but you've got Upper Deck, but they do mostly hockey. It's like, which is funny because Panini tried to sue them recently about, hey, Topps has monopolistic practices. Hey, Panini, you did that for 15 years. Get out of here. When you look at the National, it's strange how Topps has changed in a very short time when Fanatics took it over. I remember Topps really catering to kids a lot. That's been taken over a little bit by Jeff Wilson. But, they had a guy named Alan Nars, I think his name was. He was an older guy. He would honk a horn all the time. And he drummed up a lot of enthusiasm at the Topps booth for kids. He just kind of disappeared. As soon as Fanatics took over, I haven't seen him at the National since. Just kind of weird. Just kind of like Fanatics going away from, hey, we're participating in a hobby, to corporate Topps, where it's like, hey, we're working with influencers. They're getting 100K. It's all about business terms with Topps. Market share, allocation. These are things that are talked about in the business world, not necessarily a hobby. But, they got bills to pay. They paid $500 million for this, so I guess you can't blame them. Now, at the National, not only have they kind of gotten rid of the kids aspect, but they've also gotten rid of things like pack redemptions, which probably hurts. It probably will hurt wax sales at the National over time. Now they've created their own national specific boxes that they sell for $250 to $400 for 4 packs of 16 cards. The price varies depending on what sport you chose, but that was EQL available. So it's either EQL or SOL, one of the two. They got rid of the Q&A party that they've done for over 10 years. I went to the first one in Baltimore. And not only that, but, there are guys that were at Topps representatives that were at the Q&As every year. And not only were, there was no Q&A available. I don't know if any of those guys were at the National this year. I didn't see them, but it does raise some big red flags, with Topps. Like, hey, what happened to these guys that were kind of, they were good guys. You could talk to them about the hobby. Your voice would get heard. And now it's just like, oh, those guys are just kind of want to push those guys out and do some other things. Now, recently, and they did it like a fake protest at the National, which is stupid. Fanatics announced that if you participate in your Fanatics Collect site, which is like an eBay types, you're buying and selling cards, that if you sell cards on Fanatics Collect, that you pay 0% in fees if you keep your money there as fan cash, which you could spend on cards. You could spend it on their gambling site, I think. You could spend it, anywhere within the Fanatics universe. Okay. And I like the idea that they're competing with eBay about fees, because eBay's fees are too high. Talk about enshittification. eBay fees continue to go up. I like the competition. I hope that Fanatics Collect is actually successful here, because they can hopefully drop eBay's fees down. Although generally if fees go up, they don't come down. But competition might cause that. We'll see. The Fanatics, the fan cash thing sounds kind of nice, but it also sounds a little bit like the company store, historically, where you're working and you make a certain amount of money, and that money goes to the company store, and it can be only spent there, and the prices on things are outrageous, and you just basically get nothing or very little in return. Now, that's not 100% accurate with fan cash. You can convert it into cash. You have to pay, but you're paying fees on that. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen there. But Fanatics is trying to turn things into a company store where you're buying with script. The money that you made that goes directly to the company store in that case. Now, to kind of finalize my view of Fanatics, I've said this in many videos. The hobby works best in anonymity, where things are just kind of anonymously happening. Whether it's buying cards and selling cards at a show, going on eBay and buying a card, or, maybe using Fanatics Collect to buy stuff. It works best in anonymity. The problem that I have most with Fanatics is they're trying to personalize the hobby. Like, hey, you should buy these cards. Look at the cards that this guy has. Look, Card Collector 2 is hanging out with us at the Topps booth. Jeff Wilson's with it. It's all personalized. And I don't think that's the way the hobby works best. I just don't. And to me, the first couple of years of Fanatics, it looks on the surface like they're picking a lot of winners, and there's a lot of people that are losing on the other end because of it. And that's just what it looks like to me. Maybe I'm wrong. But, you see all these people like at Fanatics Fest, like Livy Dunn's buying cards and Wemby's buying cards. And, these people don't know anything about cards. They don't. But they're picking winners. Oh, we're going to sit down with this famous athlete and open a pack. And, oh my God, there's a 101 of that player. How many times have you seen that happen? It's happened more than just lucky encounters. It's happened a lot. The hobby is never good with a monopoly. We saw that with Panini. Panini had some good stuff, but without competition, any industry is not good with no competition. Fanatics is King Kong in the industry for now. They are the top dog. They are, the number one company by far. That's just the way it is. When you have the licenses, and they've got a lot of momentum, I'll give them that. In a couple short years, they have really, dominated the scene. But what happens when the dust settles for Topps? Like last year in football, their rookie class wasn't very good. This year, it's probably going to be worse. In basketball, they've got a good group coming in. This class coming up, Caleb Wilson and Devonza and Darren Peterson. But the year after, that class is supposed to be really bad. So what's going to happen when the dust settles and people realize, hey, Topps is going to keep putting out Steph Curry autos and Wemby autos every year, and every year it's going to be numbered to 5, and it's going to lose its specialness. Professor Sports Cards mentioned that. I thought that was a really good point that he made in the video is, people are really excited about these cards, But the thing is, like, Topps is going to keep making these cards every year. Is there going to be enough demand? Is the market going to be the same a year from now, 2 years from now? What's going to happen when Topps is the only game in town, clearly, in 5 years, and it's same old, same old? We're going to find out. Keep in mind, and Topps has to realize this, Fanatics has to realize this, is that there's well over 100 years worth of cards to collect that aren't Topps/Fanatics. And collectors can collect those. They don't have to collect what's in front of them. So we'll see. So that's my spiel on Fanatics. Like, subscribe. A lot of people have been watching the videos from the National. Thanks for that. A lot of people have subscribed. Thank you to all the new subscribers. Thank you for all the people that have kind of stuck around over the last couple of years. Like I said a while back, I started this channel kind of on a dare. My brother's just like, "Whoa, why don't you start a channel?" You know, he was already running one, and I kind of did. And it's been fun. And I want to kind of keep it that way. And so, Ketos, thank you. And we'll see you down the trail.